Welcome back to the Fulker Lab podcast, where we discuss intelligence, strategy, leadership, and discernment. If you've been with us the last few episodes, you know we've been walking through this strategy journey together. We started with a future picture. Where do you intend to be? Then we talked about systems and Warden's 5 rings, what systems need to change. Then we dug into centers of gravity and how to design operations, parallel versus serial, and why "we'll fix that later" is not a strategy, it's a fantasy. In the last episode, we talked measures of merit and feedback loops and the noble art of not lying to yourself with pretty metrics that mean absolutely nothing. Today, we're closing the loop. Think of this as the season finale of your inner strategist. We're going to talk about finishing strategy, what it looks like to live this stuff out over time, to adjust without flailing, and to know when it's time to stop, exit, and move on. In Prometheus language, this is the finish with finesse part of the process. And honestly, it's where a lot of great sounding strategies quietly go to die behind a SharePoint link and a forgotten slide deck. So grab your coffee, your notebook, or the nearest napkin. Let's land this thing. Let's start here. Most strategy fails not because it was stupid, but because no one knew how to finish it. We're actually pretty good at beginning strategy. We love the offsites, the sticky notes on walls, the blue sky thinking, where someone inevitably says, "What if we just reimagine everything?" And everyone nods solemnly like we're in a TED Talk. We are bad at the part 6 months later where someone says, "Hey, whatever happened to that?" And the room goes quiet, and people suddenly get very interested in their email. Prometheus bakes the whole journey in. Future picture, systems, centers of gravity, operations, measures of merit, feedback loops, and then, crucially, review, modify, exit. That last word, exit, is the one we treat like the terms and conditions checkbox. Technically necessary, completely ignored. So in this episode, I want to do 3 things. First, zoom back out and connect all the dots so this doesn't feel like a bunch of isolated concepts you're supposed to memorize for a test. Second, talk about what it feels like in real life to run a strategy cycle, the awkward check-ins, the moments of uh-oh, the temptation to spin. And third, talk about finishing with finesse, how to end efforts on purpose instead of just ghosting them like a bad dating app match. Let's connect the dots. Do you remember the previous episode in this series when we discussed the future picture in depth? That was the moment you stopped asking, "What are we doing next quarter?" and started asking, "Who are we becoming 3 years from now?" In Warden's world, you don't start with troops, planes, budgets, or org charts. You start with a vivid description of the future you want to create. That's the movie of your strategy. Not, "We will improve stakeholder alignment," but in 3 years, people actually trust us and call us first when something matters. Then we said, okay, nice future, but you don't get there by yelling at the outer ring. That's Warden's 5 rings: leadership, system essentials, infrastructure, population, and fielded forces or outputs. You can't just hammer the outer ring, the visible stuff, like more reports, more emails, more meetings, and expect your world to change. You must think like an architect and ask, what's the system that keeps producing the results I hate? Then we talked about centers of gravity, those leverage points in the system that if you hit them with the right effects, everything else starts behaving differently. That's where operations come in, the sequence, or better, the set of parallel actions you're going to take against those centers of gravity to yank your system toward your future picture. In the last episode, we added the uncomfortable grown-up part: measures of merit and feedback loops. Not just we did a lot, but did any of this matter? That was the performance versus effectiveness conversation. We published 25 Intel summaries versus 3 of them actually changed a decision, and 1 prevented a bad decision. Or, I went to the gym 5 times versus I can now pick up my kid without throwing out my back, and I'm not winded on stairs. All of that has been building to a very unsexy but crucial question. What do you do with all this once it's in motion? Because here's the danger. You can have a clear future picture, A decent system map, solid centers of gravity, promising operations, and honest measures of merit, and still drift right back into business as usual if you don't finish well. So what does finishing with finesse look like? In Prometheus terms, there's a discipline of planning in the open, measuring, reviewing, modifying, and exiting. In human terms, it looks like this. You regularly sit down with your plan, your data, and your people, and you have an honest conversation that may end with, "We were wrong. Let's change this," or "We're done. This served its purpose. Let's stop." Let me give you a composite story, because as we know, if you tell a true Pentagon story with names, your clearance will self-destruct. Imagine a team in a headquarters, somewhere that decides they're going to transform decision-making speed. That's their future picture. Faster, better decisions. Great. They do this system work. They figure out that their center of gravity isn't more smart people, but reducing friction and how information flows to the decision maker. They redesign operations, a new process, new tools, maybe even a new battle rhythm. 6 months later, they're in a conference room with sad coffee, looking at data. What they want to say is, "We're crushing it." What the data is whispering, because metrics are introverts, is, "You changed the system, but the outcome didn't move." Total time from request to decision is basically the same. You just move the bottleneck down the line. This is the moment where finishing with finesse either lives or dies. If the only thing they measure is how many people use the new application, they'll declare victory. Adoption is high. High five. Keep the posters. If, however, they are serious about their future picture, their measures of merit say something like, average time from request to decision decreased by 30% within 12 months, and they are willing to listen when that number refuses to budge. Finesse here looks like saying, we got some things right and some things wrong. This version didn't reduce time. Let's adjust this part, kill that part, and reattack this center of gravity a different way. It might also look like, we were solving the wrong problem. The real center of gravity is somewhere else entirely. The non-finesse version is, let's just let this quietly fade away and hope no one asks. Which, be honest, we've all done. Ghosting as a strategy. Let's bring this down to your life for a second, because it's easy to laugh at the big organizations and forget that we run the same play at home. You have your own little Prometheus process going, whether you call it that or not. You have a future picture. I want to be less anxious, or I want to be a more present parent, or I'd like to not feel like my inbox is chewing on my soul every morning. You have systems, your routines, your calendar, your tech, your default habits. You have centers of gravity, sleep, boundaries, that one relationship that sets the tone for your week, the phone that lives basically in your hand. You lunch operations. You decide, I'm going to get up earlier, or no phone at the dinner table, or I'm going to block time for deep work instead of living in email. You might even write this down, which already puts you in the top 10% of strategy humans. 2 weeks in, what happens? Real life. A kid gets sick, work gets weird, you're tired. Suddenly your future picture of calm, present, wise me is competing with just make it through Tuesday me. This is where finishing with finesse matters. If your only measure is, was I perfect? You will declare failure, apologize to your calendar, and go back to doom scrolling. If your measures of merit are more honest and tied to your actual future picture, things like 2 device-free family dinners this week, or 2 nights where I didn't fall asleep to my phone glowing in my face. You can see progress even when life is messy. Then you review. You look at your week and say, okay, I hit one of those, not 2. Why? Maybe the operation you chose was unrealistic. Maybe you're attacking the wrong center of gravity. Maybe your system is still wired for chaos and you need to change something upstream, like when you go to bed. Modify. Try a slightly different operation. Shrink the experiment. Change the time of day. Adjust the people involved. And sometimes, this is the part we avoid, you exit. Not because you're a failure, but because the thing you thought would be strategic is not. Maybe your big goal of mastering 6 new productivity apps is just procrastination in a suit and tie. Let it go. Exit with grace. One of the things I love about Warden's approach is that it treats strategy as a living experiment, not a stone tablet. The point is not to be right on day one. The point is to keep aiming your efforts at the future picture and use feedback to aim better. Think about it like this. If your favorite GPS app treated the route the way we treat most strategic plans, it would say, in 10 miles, turn left, and then silently judge you for the rest of the drive as you miss exits, hit traffic, and end up at a Taco Bell you did not intend to visit. A good GPS doesn't just give you a plan, it keeps adjusting based on reality, traffic, wrong turns, construction, and its only job is to keep rerouting you toward the destination. Prometheus is a bit like that for your strategy. You lock in a future picture. You map the system. You pick centers of gravity. You design operations. You add measures of merit. And then, as reality happens, you reroute. The plan isn't sacred. The destination is. So if you're thinking, okay, this is nice, but what am I supposed to do with this tomorrow? Let's talk about running one full mini-cycle in real life. Pick one area, not your entire career, the national security strategy, your family legacy, and your sleep schedule all at once. One area. Maybe it's your team's weekly meeting that currently oscillates between chaotic and soul-crushing. And your future picture is, in 3 months, this meeting is focused, shorter, and people actually walk out with clarity instead of confusion. You write that future picture down in plain language. You map the system. Who's in the room? What inputs they have? How decisions get made? Where the time gets sucked away? You identify a center of gravity. Maybe it's not people don't care. It's no one prepares because the agenda shows up 5 minutes before the meeting. You design and plan operations. You decide you're going to experiment for 6 weeks with 3 things. Sending a simple agenda 24 hours in advance, starting with decisions that need to be made, and ending with clear taskings and timers. That's your parallel set of actions. Measures of merit, not number of agenda items covered, but things like meeting length reduced by 20%, and participants can, 5 minutes after the meeting, accurately describe the top 2 decisions made. Is that perfect? No. Is it better than it felt less awful? Yes. You run the experiment for 6 weeks. Every 2 weeks, you do a 5-minute review. Are the meetings shorter? Is clarity up? Is there less after-meeting chaos? If yes, keep going and refine. If no, you change something. If after 6 weeks and a couple of adjustments, nothing has really moved, you call it. This play isn't working. Exit. Try a different center of gravity. That's finishing with finesse. Not blaming people, not pretending, not letting things drag on forever out of habit. Just honest, iterative strategy. Now you might be thinking, this all sounds like more work. Can't I just go back to winging it and complaining? And you can. That is a valid life choice. But here's the trade. Without a process like this, your default strategy is whatever your environment and your habits decide it is. Your future picture becomes slightly more of whatever is already happening, which is how people wake up 10 years later wondering how they ended up in a life they never consciously chose. With a process, even a lightweight one, you get to aim your effort. You stop confusing tired with effective. You stop worshiping vanity metrics. You stop treating every problem like a nail just because you own a really nice hammer. And here's the little secret. Once you get used to thinking this way, it becomes weirdly fun. You start seeing systems everywhere. You're in a terrible process, and instead of pure rage, there's a small voice in your head going, I see, we're hammering the outer ring again. You hear someone brag about how many reports they produced, and you find yourself politely asking, cool, did any of them change anything? The point of this whole strategy series was not to turn you into a full-time PowerPoint strategist, condemned to draw 5 rings on every whiteboard until the end of time. The point was to give you a way of thinking, a Prometheus-style mindset that you can apply at any scale, a way to look at your world and ask, where am I going? What system am I in? Where is the leverage? What will I do? How will I know if it's working? And am I willing to adjust or stop when the evidence says I should? So as we close out this series, here's my invitation. Don't try to implement the entire Prometheus process in your entire life by Friday. That way lies madness, or at least a very crowded notebook. Instead, pick one place to run a mini strategy, one future picture, one little system, one center of gravity, a couple of simple operations, a few honest measures of merit, and then, for the next few weeks, run the loop. Act, measure, review, adjust, or exit. And if you do this and think, this is harder than I thought, congratulations. You are doing real strategy. It is harder than just going with your gut, but it's also more hopeful because it means you're no longer condemned to live inside whatever system you happen to inherit. Hey, thanks for walking through this strategy series with me. If it's made you even a little more suspicious of your favorite metrics, a little more curious about your systems, and a little more intentional about your future picture, then we're already winning. This is the Folker Lab Podcast. Go pick one thing you want to change. Give it a real future picture. Build one simple feedback loop, and dare to tell yourself the truth about how it's going. Then come back and tell me how it went, preferably with fewer vanity metrics and more actual impact. I'll see you in the next episode.